Welcome to a new lesson where we will dive into setting up an advanced Docker development environment. In this lesson, we are focusing on practical skills, showing you how to optimize and manage your Dockerized development setup efficiently. Let's get started. So here I have created a web directory, and inside web directory I created 3 files for our lesson today. The first file is the Docker file that we will build our Express Node.js application from. So in this Docker file, I'm using the Node version 14 as the base image. Then I set up the working directory in the container to/app, and I copy everything from the current directory to the app directory inside the container. Then I execute run npm install to install any needed packages specified in the package.json file. Then I expose port 8000 to the world outside the container. And I also define an environment variable that the node_env is production. Then I run the application or the index.js. So let me modify this to be index.js. So I will execute inside the container the command node index.js. Then we have our index.js file. It's a simple Node.js code that only shows the hello world output, and also it will be listening on port 8000. Finally, to our package.json, which is very simple, we here define all the dependencies for our Express code or Express Node.js code. Okay, now let me close all those files and let's create our Docker Compose file. So I will execute touch docker compose.yml. Let's edit the file, and as we learn it together, the first line inside the Docker Compose will be the version, and we are using version 3.8. Then we will define our services. So let's type services here, and our service is a web service, and this web service will be built from the Docker file inside the web directory. So let's type build, then I will define the path to the Docker file. So the Docker file inside web directory. I wanted to expose and map ports, so let's type ports here, and I will map the port 8000 on my local host to port 8000 inside the container. Then I want to mount our source code to the container, so I will type volumes here, and the first mount will be the web directory, and the web directory will be mounted to /app, which is the working directory for the Node.js application inside the container. Then I will also create the volume /app/node_modules. Now let's define a variable for the web. So let's type here environment, and our environment will be node_env development. And the variable here inside Docker Compose will override the variable from the Docker file. Or let me rephrase that. So when we build the image, the environment node_env inside the image will be production. But when we define here a new variable for the node_env to be development, that means that when we run the container, then the running container will take the value of node_env from the Docker Compose, so it will be development. Now our web service will depend on the DB service. So now let's define our second service for this lesson, which is the DB service. The DB service will be running from the Postgres image. So I will type here Postgres, and I want version 13. Let's also define some environment variables for the DB service. So I will type here environment, and our first environment will be Postgres_user. Let's type dev user. The second environment variable will be Postgres_password, and the value is dev pass. Then let's define Postgres underscore DB, and the value is div DB. So when the DB service runs a container from the image Postgres 13, it will create the Postgres user, Postgres password, and Postgres database that we defined inside the environment. So in this Docker Compose file, we have a web service and a DB service. The web service builds from a Docker file in the web directory, and we map the application's port 8000 to the same port on the host. We are also mounting the project directory to /app inside the container, ensuring live reloading of our code. Now let's enhance this with a docker compose.override YAML file for development specific settings. This allowed us to keep our main docker compose YAML file optimized for production. So let's create a new file here with the name docker compose.override. And let's edit this file, docker compose override YAML. Also, the version will be 3.8. The services will be the same, web service, but we will define a different environment here, debug equal 1, and also we will change the exposed ports or the mapped ports. So this time we will do 3000 on my local host will be mapped to 8000 in the running container. Then to the DB service, and we will override the ports here to be 5432 and 5432. So this override modifies the web services port to 3000 and exposes our database's port for direct access, useful for debugging. Docker Compose.override YAML is a powerful feature of Docker Compose that allows you to override settings in your base Docker Compose YAML file for local development, testing, or any situation where you need to modify your application's configuration without altering the main Docker Compose file. This mechanism helps maintain clean and maintainable configurations by separating environment-specific settings like volume mounts for development, port changes, or environment variables from the core service definition. And by default, when you run Docker Compose up, Docker Compose automatically looks for a file named dockercompose.yaml and an optional override file named dockercompose.override.yaml, or also you can rename this to dev or test or whatever. Then Docker Compose up will merge the configurations in the override file over the base file. Okay, before executing Docker Compose command, let's go back to our Docker Compose.yaml file. And as you can see here, for the DB service, I defined the environment variable for Postgres user, password, and DB, but I hard-coded the values here, which is not the best practice because you need to take any sensitive data from the Docker Compose file. So let's incorporate .env files to manage environment variables. Let's create a .env file in our project root. So I will execute touch.env, and let's edit the env here. And inside the env, I will provide the node_env to be development. Then I will provide the value for the Postgres user, Postgres password, and Postgres database, and to the debug. Now let's update our Docker Compose YAML to use the variables from .env. So for the Postgres user, I will type $, then curly braces, and Postgres user. I will do the same for Postgres password and Postgres database. This approach keeps your configuration flexible and secure. Now let's put this into action. Ensure your Docker engine is running, and from the terminal, let's execute docker compose up --build -d. And here I added --build because in our Docker Compose file, we are building our image for the web service from a Docker file. Now press enter to execute the command. And as you can see, it is now running the DB service. And now it is building the web service from the Docker file. And it created and started the container for the DB and the container for the web. To verify our work, let's run docker compose, then ps. And as you can see from the output, we have the DB service running and the web service running. And also we can see the configuration we added to the docker compose override. So for example, here, the port for the database is exposed to the public. And also we have here the port that inside the docker compose file, and also the override port we defined inside the docker compose override file. Now let's verify our work from the web browser. So I will go to localhost 8000, and as you can see, the hello world message shown for me. Let's also try with the port from the docker compose.override YAML file. And also, as you can see, we can see the hello world. Now let's make a change in our web application. So I will go to the index.js and I will change the hello world here to hello students. I will save my change, and from here I will execute docker compose, restart, then the web service to reflect our changes. And here the web service started, and it took like 10 seconds to restart the service. Now let's bring back the web browser and let's revisit the localhost 8000. And as you can see, right now it loads the new changes we just made. And the credit for that goes to the volumes we have defined here in the Docker Compose. So we mounted the web directory to the /app directory inside the container. So whatever change you will do inside the web directory, as we did with the index.js content, it will be reflected inside /app. But of course, if to reflect that change, you need to restart the Node.js application, then you will need to restart it with the Docker Compose, restart, then the service name. In our use case, the service name is web. And that's it for this lesson today. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next lesson.